had been for 2 or 3 years. So I'm not saying I'm going to find that here, but I'm saying that can be pretty telling of what's going on. Another community where they had if somebody would open an account for 6 months and they move out of an apartment, that account would still sit on the rolls. They would in a sense be charged even though they weren't sending bills, so they kept having these billing deficiencies. So I'm going to probably spend an afternoon here with the billing person, and he or she won't like me by the time I leave.
Josh, I don't know how much time we have, but I got a couple questions. I think you've demonstrated, at least to me, that your business model or your computer model that you're going to use, it certainly doesn't seem to be leaving anything unturned here. So we could finish here, and all you would do is increase the knowledge that your system indeed does work. My question is, and I apologize, but the company you work for, is this your company?
No, I work for a nonprofit agency.
Okay. This is and this organization is out of?
Well, it's the RCAP program is a nationwide program. We are funded from Ohio EPA, OWDA, USDA Rural Development, a lot of different funding agencies. Our administering agency that administers the RCAP program for the Great Lakes region is WSOS Community Action Commission in Fremont. And WSOS is not a radio station, contrary to popular belief. It is in St. Augustine, Florida, but not in Fremont. It's Wood, Sandusky, Ottawa, and Seneca County. It's the community action in that area. They've always had the contract to administer the program. So
your business model, who developed that? Or not your business model, but
the
software program.
It's not a software, it's just Excel spreadsheets. It's basically a hybrid of the AWWA. They have a model that they use. We've gone to some different rate study, basically rate setting programs around the country. We've taken ones that work for bigger communities and trying to mold it down to something that keeps it simplified for the smaller communities.
Are you required to be certified, registered, recognized in any way?
No.
By anybody in Ohio?
No.
Okay, so how many communities have you, because you'll be the person physically here.
Yes.
And how many communities have you done? You said 25 years a little earlier, but that doesn't seem quite right.
And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've probably done about 20 to 30 of them. Okay,
and when you present the final draft or the final, has anyone said, no, we don't, this is nothing, we're going to go look at somebody else?
I've never had anybody say no. I've had a couple of communities say, yeah, we don't want to implement the reserves yet, but usually it's they'll take some element of it. So I think I've only had one that has said no, they don't want to do that. So,
and what's their history today?
They are basically they're in the drawer in my office of they'll probably call me very soon because they're having some financial difficulties. So
and once you do this initial program, how long does that take?
Once Lance and the city gets me everything I need, I'm usually back within about a month with some preliminary questions. I get those answered. I'm back within about another month with the what I call the rough draft of the rate study, because you guys will all have input to it, and I kind of get your input before I do the final draft. And we'll do a work session where we crunch some numbers and well, what if we did this to scenario 1? Can we change this, or can we do this? But usually it's about 3 months to get the numbers to you guys, and then however long it takes your process.
So we're looking at realistically 3 to 6 months
to get everything implemented. Because I always tell communities that when I finish here in the next 5-10 minutes, I'll spend. You don't want to do things as an emergency.
Yeah. It's a one-time deal. We'll never see you again.
I hope not. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, is that a permanent contract, or you come back once a year, look at your numbers again every 5 years?
The goal that we have is that you will get a book with a CD in it, that the city will get the spreadsheets, that how we as an organization are developed is we're a capacity building organization. You know, yes, there's a fee to do the study initially, but we hope that through the process we're teaching you to be able to, you know, in a year from now or 2 years from now, when you're stepping back and saying we need to look at our rates again, dust off the report, put the spreadsheet in. You're going to have a 5-year financial projection based on your 5-year financial history. You'll change a few things, tweak a few things. If a new project has arisen, go ahead and you know, put that new project into the funding scheme, and you'll be able to essentially do your rate study on your own.
And I understand that your proposal is for both the water and the sewer?
Yes.
That's one rate that are one, so
Yeah.
we'll have 2 reports?
Yeah, I mean, I usually will do them in the same report, but I can do them in 2 reports too.
Well,
If it's
I'm
more
not saying that,
simplified,
but we're
Yeah.
we're looking at 2 utilities.
yeah, it's easier to do both at the same time too, because when you look at your billing records and so forth, we're looking at water and sewer stuff.
Okay.
So,
Okay, you can finish,
so.
unless somebody...
So you're basically a numbers geek, for lack of a better term.
I'm a spreadsheet.
You're a
nerd.
spreadsheet guy. Okay.
And we'll look at a lot of, one of the things that we'll look at too is we're going to look at some of your billing policies. We're going to look at some of your collection, some of your rules and regs and your policies, and kind of make some managerial recommendations too. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's a lot of numbers and a lot of spreadsheets and numbers.
All right. I have a question for Matt. What's our tap-in fee for residential?
It's $2,100 for a 3/4 inch tap.
For 3/4
Yes.
tap? And for commercial, is it?
Based on meter size?
Commercial, minimum commercial is a 1-inch tap. That's $2,200.
And do we have any extremely large meters? Do we have any 8 or 10-inch meters in town?
No 8-inch.
No 8-inch.
I believe the biggest meter we have is probably 4-inch.
4 inches or large?
Yeah, but I have to check on that, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
But
it's
we don't
not.
have anything 8 or 10 inch?
No, sir.
Okay. And we have wells.
Yeah.
Okay, so how much different is this process with us because we have wells versus, is it any different?
No, it's no different. The only difference I see between groundwater and surface water is typically surface water costs are usually a little bit higher. You know, it costs more to provide surface water to you. So, you know, I always, you know, on a per connection basis, when we look at groundwater versus surface water, it's typically a little bit less for groundwater than it is for surface water. So, you know, that's just a bit of information I need to know when I do some long-term projections for capital replacement.
And when you do all your calculations, do you take assumptions if one well went bad or 2 wells went bad? I mean, is any of that emergency type money forced into the plan?
Yes, I will build in some emergency funds and some of your 5 to 10 year projects will be built into it as well for funding. So the goal is to give you a good 5-10 year window that you eliminate surprises. You don't want surprises 2 years from now. But, so jumping ahead here, the affordability standards, I think you guys are well aware of, but you know, each of the funding agencies does have their affordability standards they look at. One of the things I will say is you don't want to arbitrarily just set your rates because Josh from RCAP was here. He told us to set rates at 1.5% of median household income, so that's what we're going to set them. Your budget dictates your rates. However, if you are looking at getting a project funded and your rates are below that 1.5% number, then you've got some room within your rate structure to build in yourself and pay for some things yourself. So don't just set your rates at that level, but be aware of it because that's going to maximize your funding eligibility. You know, at the end of the day, somebody has to pay. You know, whether you want to reduce the rates for business customers, reduce the rates for low income, or whatever you want to do, at the end of the day, somebody has to pay that cost to run your system. And that need for revenue does change over time. Your operating costs will continually go up. You don't want to have rate shock to your customers. You don't want to not fund replacement, not fund things, so that when you do fund a project, you see a huge spike in your rates. Those create very painful situations for everybody. Inflation happens. I'll jump ahead a couple of slides here, but on page 17, this is the one thing, if you are asleep, start paying attention now. Let's take a very simple system, 10 customers. Rates are $1 a year. I own all the property rates in that community, so you can buy from me. Rates are $1 a year. If you go 3% a year, so the next year is $1.03, $1.06, $1.09, $1.13. The end of year 5, you're going to have $53.10 of cumulative revenue for those 10 customers. If you take the approach of we're going to keep the rates low and do everybody a favor, but in year 5 we're going to play catch up so that we still have $53.10, you're looking at a 31% rate increase to play catch up in year 5. If you wait another year, you're looking at a 47% increase. If you wait another year, you're looking at a 67% increase. Those are very, very painful increases. You want to do your customers a favor and do small incremental increases over time. Got a community in Geauga County where they didn't raise their water rates for 23 years. And I sat there during the public hearing and crunched numbers. If they would have, the rate that they were proposing to go through from 1988 to 2011 was a matter of 85 cents difference between what it would have been and what they were going to had they just done 3% a year for those 23 years. The result was a very painful increase, but they would have been able to lighten that burden if they would have just done it a little bit over time. So, and they would have had a lot more revenue to work with so that pieces of rust weren't falling off their tower and so forth. So, time is money. Inflation will happen. So, one of the things that we will push is after we leave here, doing a 5-year or 10-year rate plan where you do a little bit, 2 or 3% every year, to at least keep up with things. Now, if you add a capital project, yeah, you're gonna probably need to jump your rates a little bit higher, but at least that's going to cover changes in operating costs. The goal is that you try to eliminate those rate shock situations. There is no overwhelming guarantee of public support for rate increase. I have a great picture in my office of the city of Bucyrus. Had a public meeting during the rate increase, and somebody was standing about where the picture was then, took a picture of the audience, and somebody asked the question, how many residents don't want to see a water rate increase? Everyone raised their hand, and they snapped the picture at the very perfect time. And that made the front page of the paper. Yes, nobody wants it, but it's a reality. But you need to educate your community. You need to explain why it's being done. You need to do public education, speak to the civic groups. You need to explain that each customer's paying their fair share, because that will make life a lot easier. It all goes back to public perception. We have a pretty red fire truck here. I know it's a semi-volunteer fire department here, so I'm assuming that there are events and so forth during the year where people come out and support the fire department, chili cook-off, chicken barbecue, 50-50 raffle, and so forth. My question is, when was the last 50-50 raffle for your water sources? That fire truck is not going to be any good if your water system is falling apart to the point that you can't serve, you can't provide fire protection. But typically, it's out of sight, out of mind. So there is a value associated with that, and your customer base needs to support that. Think about the objections you're going to hear. The other part of us doing this is I come back to the public hearing and I'm the bad guy because I get to get in my car and go home at night. There are people in your community, and a name if the same name pops in everybody's head, you're lucky you only have one in town. There are people in your community that are actually happy or being unhappy. It doesn't matter what you tell them, whether it's a 50-cent increase or a $15 increase, they're going to be equally unhappy. You're not going to change their opinion. But most of your citizens don't understand the value of your system. They don't know that 10 to 15,000 connection for sewer, or 8 to 10,000 for water. That number's never been communicated to them. So this is when you need to start to communicate those things to your community. market your system. You already, once a year, you pay for the consumer confidence report. You're already paying for printing, you're already paying for postage. Why not spend an extra little bit of money on another page and talk about what you're doing in your water and sewer system? Lay out your 5 or 10-year capital plan. Explain how the rates are calculated. Explain how those things are done. Market your system. As an industry, they've done a really poor job of marketing themselves for 40, 50, 60 years. If you have a water plant that was built in the 50s, probably got some grant money in the 50s, the debt's been paid off for probably 20 or 30 years. So, in a sense, your customers have been only paying for the value of the water for the last 20, 30 years. They haven't been paying for the infrastructure. So you need to start to implement those infrastructure costs into your rate. So, and it, like I said, it is a political process. It takes time. You don't want to do things as an emergency. You know, have time for public input, but at the end of the day, you've got to do something, and time is money. So, I got about 5 minutes for questions, or if you want to take a break, I'm done.
Anybody have any questions for him?
Do you do any rate studies that involve a base minimum, so that we factor into that rate?
Like having everything billed on a per unit basis. I've had a couple of communities where that they don't have a minimum, and we've built one in and we're done, because you've got to have some sort of base charge. And the easiest way to look at it is, you think about it, you know, to have somebody go out and read the meter, bring the report back, have the billing person input the data, mail the bill, receive the bill, process the payment, deposit the payment. You've probably got $3 to $5 per connection right there. Before, so you know, you've got those expenses that are there before you sell a drop of water. You need to have stable revenue. Most of your debt funders, when they look at your debt for new projects, they're going to want to see that you have some sort of, they're going to shy away from being built into a usage charge. So that's kind of the reasoning for it. So we've had a few that haven't had that. You know, they've just kind of had a real high per unit charge, and we've at least created some sort of, you know, $10, $15 minimum that they can kind of work with.
You said about a reserve, or 10 to 20% reserve. Asset management, 10 to 20% or 10 to 15% into an escrow account?
Yeah.
Now, is that 10 to 15% of our annual budget?
No, that's you know, from ideally you have a plan that's inventoried your whole system. You know exactly the replacement schedule for every component. You know the value of it, useful life. That takes time to do. That takes a lot of, that's labor intensive. What we like to see is that, you know, if you give yourself a 30-year planning window, some things aren't going to last 30 years, some things will last 50, but if you give yourself an average of a 30 to 40-year planning window, take the value of your system, divide that by 30 or 40 years, and then take 10 or 15% of that number, that's going to be kind of what your annual reserve should be. So, you know, you might be 20, 30, 40, 50,000 into kind of an annual reserve that you need to look at.
And that's every year?
Yeah. So, and the hope is that in the next, you know, doesn't mean you're going to do a $50,000 project every year, but every 5, 10 years you may do a little bit bigger project. You've got that money up front to be able to pay for the soft cost of the project. And you know, to simplify it, it's a down payment, but the idea is that you're paying those soft costs that are cheaper to pay in the house than market rate loans.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks a lot, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for coming
Appreciate
in
it.
and speaking with us. And I guess you'll be working with Lance, and then you'll be back to see us soon.
Hopefully soon. I know he's working on getting the stuff together I sent last week. And
Is this a conflict, Mr. Mayor? Help me out here a little bit. We voted yes on this? I heard this.
We did that last meeting.
Okay.
Correct?
So, we voted before we heard. I've seen
presentation before for other things, not particularly this one.
No, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. Need a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
Quick break.
Josh, when you want to start?
What's that? Do I start?
You've already started?
I sent him an email with, we have a pretty extensive
That's right. This looks like, something's going on. So I go up to the
Yes.
where it says,
Not you.
But that's going. So I'm just gonna leave that on. They can connect.
Twice before I go out. Nice facility.
Okay, I'll mess around with
I will be back here shortly, and then once you get your stuff together, I'll come by, if I have some preliminary questions and sit down and do it. All right. Yep. See ya.
There you go. You take it for a He's probably still there.
This meeting, I think, put it right where it's working. Was it in the paper?
No.
We don't see that in our package.
Hey, Larry, how are you? Hey, what's that?
You manage?
No.
Not working?
Everything's full.
Did they not take them off? What does it say when you hit record?
It flashes down here at the bottom and says full.
When it takes them you hold down the record button, will it start?
It used to be.
It's not going.
Not doing anything.
I guess you'll have to, you'll have to delete them manually.
That's what you up to. One thing. Keep the dry warm. Oh, yeah. Just curious. I mean, it's amazing. 68 or 78. When they don't, probably charge for about a 10-year window. That's what you want. Yeah. So, I'm far behind.
You're young, yeah.
We got a grandson that's going to get married here. Drew is. Yeah, really? Yeah.
Down in DC.
What's he, 27? 26, 27?
26.
I had a little 25. Couldn't believe it. He said, Why? I can't believe it because, you know, there's so many years went by. I don't know if it all happened.
Not that it's bad, but
It just seemed like when I was getting ready to retire, I felt like a young man. I retired, and there's been 12 years gone.
So you retired at 66?
Well, I actually started at 60, really. I did a little bit of work for the company as far as going back and taking care of it. See, you got a new job.
No, I actually got a job.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
They just gave you the title and the money then, huh?
Well, nothing changed.
Usually that's what they did in the factory. You did the job for a while, finally you got a title, but nothing wrong with it.
No, I had to try on everything, so I don't know we came up with that.
What are they building in this?
So they're supposed to be taking all those recordings and storing them somewhere? It runs, she uploads and what's in there?
Norwood's on that property. The farm across the street there from me.
The girl that sits over there?
They get more money.
Was he got a big dozer and stuff in there the other day I was by? It looks like they got a foundation or something dug back in there.
It might be, I don't know. We went down toward Kelly Park there. They were talking about going with the walking cabin. So I don't know what's going to happen.
They sure did increase that funding and that huge building they put up. Some of the guys in our league are down playing golf already. They go down when there's a nice day. They just go down.
Pretty cold.
38, 32.
Yeah, 32. I played at 38.
It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold. You do a nice business up there.
You know, the restaurant's going.
Downstairs there, or outside here?
I'd like to call to order the March 5th, 2013 meeting of the Columbiana City Council. Please stand for invocation, pledge and flag.
Lord, we pray that you will give our council members the faith and courage to carry on their duties, help them to do right and to deal fairly with others, and to place their trust in you. In your name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Ferguson?
Here.
Bank?
Here.
Bank?
Here.
Jonathan?
Here.
Bellinger? Here.
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 Scott? Wood?
Here.
Baysdale?
We'll get a copy of the February 19th, 2013 regular meeting and any errors or amendments. If not, the will stand as presented. Communications. I missed the last meeting, but I've seen that they asked for letters of interest from anyone in the planning commission. Did we receive any?
No, not to this point. I'm not aware of any.
None came into the office. Okay. Because that's something we need to do is, since Mr. McBain had to leave his seat on the planning commission, we need to appoint another person onto that. So, I don't know what everyone wants to do.
I may suggest that Mr. Ron Overholzer, in the last letter we received, so we could ask him.
He's here.
He's here. Would you be interested?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
Well, I guess we'll continue it and see if there's any interest for the next meeting. And if not, then unless somebody has an idea and they want to appoint somebody that might be here. Is anyone in here interested in being on the planning commission?
You interested yet?
We'll look at it.
Want to try one more time in the paper? The paper would be so kind to put in there that we're looking for interested people in the planning commission to have their letters in by, their next meeting will be the 19th, so we need them, so we can have them in our packet on the 15th. So we'll accept them up to the 15th.
Well, have them, so they can go in the Friday packet.
That's that Friday.
Well, why don't you make it Thursday so he can get in the packet?
Okay, we'll do that, the 14th of March. That gives us a day to get them all processed, get them all copied in the packet. Yeah, the normal hours, what, 4:30 on Thursday, March 14th. Make a decision at the next meeting. Thank you. The reports of commissions and board, everyone should have a copy of the Columbiana Park Recreation and Cemetery meeting minutes of February 4th, 2013. Any comments on these? Under recognition of person desired, Mr. Don,
He is at another meeting right now, but he will be in.
he was on the agenda when he makes it, we'll revert back to that. Is there anyone else here that desires to speak to council this evening? Moving right on into the manager's report.
In your packet, I just gave a manager's update. Met with the superintendent last Wednesday. At the water plant, we had 2 water main breaks, and several departments actually helped fix those. 25 water meters were changed out. The meter pit was rebuilt. And the USDA sent a letter approving the plan specifications bidding documents, which was really critical for this water plant to move forward. So that was good news. The wastewater plant, we had a problem out at the Windjammer the station. That pump's being serviced right now. The street crew helped with the water main breaks. Electric department, Doug's not here right now, but they're done testing that substation, and they didn't put it in service, like draw a load on it today, but they did fire it up. So it's just it's turned on, but not releasing power up. They're just monitoring it right now. I guess you gotta wait 1 or 2 days to do that.
Right.
Park and cemetery. Couple pictures here. They were out yesterday and made some progress from yesterday. You'll see that. All the light displays at the park have been taken down, placed in storage. Police chief, we got those grants in with, for the 714 project that was mailed in by that deadline.
Chief, can I ask, is that just for a study, or are we actually going to move forward and?
The 714 project is for the project itself. That was what the grant was for. As ODOT reviews these and comes back and makes approvals and awards, then there'll be some engineering to do. There'll be some other things that will have to be done before it really happens. but this was one of the first steps we had to take, is get that thing in before the deadline and get them under consideration of our project and our proposal.
And Lance, how many more meters do we have to exchange?
Is
anybody
out
know?
there, roughly?
To get 100% radio read, automated read, roughly 700 to go.
And we purchased all those, didn't we?
No, we did not.
We did not.
No.
I thought we did.
No. Talked about it, but it's,
We never did it.
no.
So we're,
No,
I guess some in reserve we gotta put up yet, or we need to
We're gonna have
purchase.
to order some right now, pretty soon.
yeah.
What do we do at a time? I can't remember.
We were buying so many a year, I forget what it was.
I think we budget roughly like 50,000 a year.
What's that, I mean, are we looking at another 2-3 years before this?
No, I hope not. I mean, we have roughly 3,000 metered customers out there. So we have 2,300 radio reads out there. We got about 700 more to go. They're like $176 a crack for a 3/4 inch meter. So.
And, let's see, when Bob comes in, hopefully he comes in, we'll, talk about that $1 grand. The rest of the report, liquor control regarding the application for a new liquor permit, the city of Columbiana, our pizza place. And there was one in your packet for, A&L Gas LLC, Quick Mart, and again, we've been giving those to the police chief.
So we need to make a motion to have a hearing on each one of those. So if someone would like to make a motion to have a hearing for the Art Pizza,
I'll make a motion.
A second.
I'll make the motion.
the motion is second. Any comments?
You know exactly what this is. They do have a liquor license, I think right now, or beer license.
They're trying to change the license to allow them to sell different types of alcoholic beverages, and they'll need to upgrade to this type of a permit to do what they want to do.
Okay, that's what I was trying to.
Yeah, it's just a change in what they'll be allowed to sell and dispense and what hours and days. We don't have any problems there, and I expressed to council before that we don't have any opposition to state against the change. Actually, on either of those, for that matter, it was simply a transfer to a different owner.
There's no distance from a school they have to be with hardly.
No, there's no restrictions on
restriction,
that.
I don't think.
As long as the precinct is, allows alcoholic beverages to be dispensed or sold in that precinct, which that one does, they're not in violation of anybody being kind of backwards across from the school.
And we always do the motion in the affirmative, and then unless you want to have a hearing, you go up. And the police chief's recommendation is there's no problems. Ian?
Ferguson,
No.
McBain,
No.
King,
No.
Schlenniger,
No.
Callender. No. Wakeman.
No.
Okay, and we'll also need a motion for a hearing for an application for transfer for the A&L Gas LLC, doing business as Quick Mart and more.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any comments on this one? Ian?
King,
No.
Schlenniger.
No.
Callender. No. Wakeman,
No.
Ferguson,
No.
McBain.
No.
Okay, back to you, Vince.
Okay, in your packet was the EMS report. And any discussion and motion to accept the 2013 budget is the next thing for the budget.
Okay. Mike, you're gonna run through it a little bit?
Sure.
I just wanted to say at first, there was quite a few of us are new on staff, and this was my first budget for the city to put one together. And once I did pretty much go through it, and what we did was meet with all the supervisors, all the superintendents to discuss each individual budget for their department. So we got a lot of input from those guys, and this is what we came up with. So the general fund, a couple items on the general fund as far as revenues. The LGF funds were once again cut by 25% out of the state budget. So you can see we lost about $40,000 in LGF funds. The inheritance tax, which normally I think was really not budgeted for, but that tax went away in 2013. There's no longer an inheritance tax. So on the revenue side, that's pretty much the big items. So the projected revenue is down this year. On the administrative side of the general fund, it's pretty straightforward as to what it was last year. We did bring it down a little bit from last year, although last year we had an issue in the salaries and wages for the dispatchers. We were down a dispatcher, and the chief had to fill in with part-timers. So all the part-timers got charged to his department. We're predicting that dispatcher's back. He was over on military leave, so we feel that the salaries will be back more in line as they were in 2011. Any questions on that part? It'd probably be easier just to, if you have any questions after each section, going back. The other part of the general fund is the police department, and the police department is about 62% of the general fund. And one of the big items that is put in there each year that chief hasn't been able to had to spend anything on was the grant expenditures. We put $50,000 in the budget for any kind of match that if he would get a grant, that we would have to match. Another item that kind of went up was in the professional fees. We're going to have labor negotiations this year. The contract runs out at the end of the year for the police union, so we'll definitely be needing to spend some money on the labor negotiations. Again, we have a purchase of a vehicle built into the fund. I don't know what kind the chief is looking at, but
It'll be a state contract purchase, Ford Explorer like what we bought last year.
okay.
And are we gonna have two then, or are we just swapping the vehicle?
We're on a 5-year life cycle replacement, so generally the oldest and/or most problematic car gets rotated off the fleet and is replaced by the newer one.
I mean, we're gonna keep the Explorer we have.
Oh yeah, that's new last year. Yeah.
And are we?
I'll replace one of the old Chevys.
Okay. Do you want to have all Explorers, or?
Not necessarily, no. We look for the best deal going and the most reliability and the different things on the Michigan State Police tests and other things to figure out what might be the most economical for us to buy. So no, I don't necessarily need all Explorers, but it's nice to have a couple of them on the fleet with all-wheel drive for bad weather. Previously we hadn't had that, and it has come in handy a couple times, although the last 2 years we've kind of gotten by pretty easy, but it'd be nice to have if we ever get really bad weather. Hopefully not tonight.
Okay, I also wanted to point out that the wages went up a little bit because the police do get a 1% longevity bonus each year. And we also had 2 younger officers their rate went up. I think they're in the 3rd year.
Actually, we negotiated a tiered salary structure with the last contract that we did, and we eliminated the longevity the way it's figured now for the older guys, which is simply unsustainable. It has no cap, and we've been trying to negotiate that out for years. We finally got it out for the newer hires, beginning of the last two we hired. But they also are in a tiered system where we stretched that out from just a couple years to multiple years before they reach top rate. And this year, they move into the second tier of that, which gives them a decent jump, but still doesn't get them anywhere near top rate. They have a few years to go yet. That saves us money over a period of time, and they'll never reach the level that we have with some of the older folks that have been here and get their base salary plus 1% longevity, some of them collecting an additional 25 to 27% over their base. It's simply unsustainable. We've negotiated that out.
Okay. The other thing, this is a little different than I know some of you have seen the last couple of years. There's 2 years of actual expenses. The first two columns, 2011, 2012. Those are the actual expenses that that we incurred the last 2 years. And then third column is the projected budget for this year. One of the things I like to point out, and not everybody's going to use all that money that is projected, such as last year in the police department, their budget was roughly pretty close to the same that we have in there this year, but they only spent 92% of their budget from last year. So this is a number that we hope we can hit, but necessarily we won't have to use all that money in that we set up for the budget. Any other questions for the police?
So had you not had 8% left, your projection for 2013 would have been higher?
No, my projection for 2013, as they are every year, are real numbers. I don't pad, I don't add 5% to last year. I literally took the personnel side is easy. You take the number of people times the roll up and the salary gives you a number. The other side, I took the actual purchase orders we spent from last year and added those up and then projected out what we looked at for this year, given increases in gas, et cetera. Interesting thing about this, we're looking at a total request that was about the same as last year, but the reality is in 2008, the actual expenditures were this much, were more than this actually. Yeah. I'm operating on funding levels that are better than they were 5 years ago. What's the reason for that? The reason is we've hired 2 younger guys, some senior guys have moved on. We found ways to save money in the overtime budget. We had some creative ways to bring in, for instance, a bunch of equipment last year that we didn't have to pay for. The Department of Homeland Security no-match grants and things for a computer system. So that's how we saved the money and got it down to that figure. But the money that I'm requesting, that's what we should come in at. If we come in higher than that, if something bad happens, then that's bad. If we have a good year like we did last year, we end up in good shape like we did this year.
So that 8% might stay in the general fund then?
That goes back into the general fund at the end of the year.
Okay, what used to be part of the general fund was the fire department. That's no longer, they have their own levy, so we'll get to that a couple more pages back. But they had some minor expenses in 2011 that was rolled into the fire levy for that year. And last year we started using the fire levy for the first year. Street department, one of the big items, everything is pretty much what it's was pretty close to what it was last year, except if you look down at the bottom under non-personal services, we've got $45,000 in there for paving. We did no paving out of this fund last year or in 2011. So even though it looks like that fund is going in the hole, but we have not spent that money the last 2 years on any kind of paving, and so we were putting in the budget $45,000 out of the street fund. State highway.
What happened to gas and oil? Why is there such a huge difference there? Under non-personal, 7,500, then it went down to 1,000.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. Just maybe the way it was divided up.
And then we budgeted 8,000 for this year.
Well, I kind of looked at what happened in 2011, also with the price of gas probably going up, has been going up. I really don't know why 2012 was that low.
I mean, is that an accurate number?
Well, that's what was charged to that that account number. I mean, I took this off all the reports, our budget reports that we do each week.
Same amount of miles driven?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Maybe more efficient vehicles?
Are they pushing them down the street?
I just feel, I think it probably got charged to another department.
I want my money back too.
State Highway Fund, this is a fund we get through motor vehicle license and gasoline tax, and it's basically, we use the revenue to purchase road salt out of this fund. You can see in 2011 with the mild winter, we didn't spend anything. We must have used enough, had enough in reserve. 2012, we spent a little over $27,000. And I'm hoping for another mild winter this year. Cemetery fund. The cemetery fund is mostly, a lot of it is funded with transfers from the general fund. We do get money from the sale of graves and interments. They are opening up a new section in the cemetery that they're going to start, I guess, selling grave sites pretty soon. Terry Schaefer mentioned that they are opening up that new section. Pretty much stays the same as last year. You can see that the end result is pretty much what we're spending is what we brought in. We'll be getting in, projected to be getting in. Any questions on the cemetery? Okay, the park fund. Again, the park fund, a lot of it is funded from the general fund. Of course, there's, they get their revenue from pool tickets, passes, rentals, concessions, pavilion rentals. And the projected income is just down a little bit. The thing what happens is when we do that budget in July, the county uses those numbers for your amended certificate for the beginning of the year. So if I predicted it a little bit low, that's what I have to use for now. But you can see the last 2 years, it was about 20,000 more than the 330. We can always amend the certificate later in the year if we get more revenue in. Let's see. The park fund is pretty close to what we did last year. Also, we did bump up the money in the operating supplies a little bit. That's pretty much the same as last year. The Firestone Park Band Music Festival, or the music and the festival, not the festival, the music in the park, that is funded by donations, and the only really expenses we have out of there is a little bit of advertising, and then the other money goes to paying the bands. Firestone Park Festival Fund, that was restarted last year. It had been canceled for a few years, so you can see there was really no expenses in 2011. And last year was the first they started back up, and they did end up with a loss. They did lose money on the festival last year. They did try to advertise quite a bit, but I just think they just had not quite a good turnout as they expected. So basically what the money we're bringing in, we have that going out as expenses and advertising and a lot of the other different expenses you use for what else you...
We actually have a budget I can give you, by the way, for the festival for this coming year.
Okay. And that's for like printing costs and that type of stuff. The Law Enforcement Trust Fund, that's just money that's been sitting there. That's when they confiscate items. But there's only $494 there, so it's not going to really buy you much. The Motor Vehicle License Fund is funded by state license tax revenues. And it's been pretty consistent. It was up a little bit last year. And again, this year, there was not much spent last year, And this is also, fund is used for paving projects. So I put additional money in there for this year for some more paving. So I know Jesse wants to get at some of the streets and do some paving this year. So we try to put enough in the budget that he'll be able to mostly do what he wants. The next one, Enforcement Education Fund. This is revenues that we get from DUI receipts and fines, and it's used for education and training. EMS Fund is next. Again, this fund is funded by a levy that was just recently passed. So that levy is good for another 5 years. One of the big items that is in the budget for this year is that Tom would like to purchase a new ambulance, and we put in there for $130,000. What is not in the revenue side is that he's planning on looking into getting a loan to finance it, and once we know the particulars, again, I can amend the revenue side. But nothing, and maybe Tom can elaborate, I mean, he hasn't really spec'd it out yet or anything, or?
No, we're looking at possibly going with a box ambulance because the Ford vans are now gas. And our concern is having one ambulance that's gas and one that's diesel looks exactly alike. 3 in the morning could create havoc. So we're trying to get a demo in of those ambulances built on Sprinter chassis to see if it'll fit in the garage because of our narrow garage doors and our diesel exhaust filter. So we planned on $130,000 based upon getting a box ambulance and buying a new cot and a couple other items so we can keep our 99 as a spare ambulance. But we haven't actually spec'd out the numbers yet, so it could come in a lot less than that. So we're going to spend what we need. We're not going to go to that unless that's absolutely necessary. So
I'm sorry, Tom. What years are the newest ambulance?
2009. We have a 99 and 2009.
And a 99.
Yes. So we're either looking at keeping it fully able to transport, so if we get a third out call, because we do get those occasionally that we can't handle, or we may just keep it as a spare if we have to use it because an ambulance gets wrecked or goes in the shop and we just transfer all equipment over. We haven't worked all through that yet, but when it comes time to buy the ambulance, we'll have all that figured out, but it won't exceed that amount, and it could actually come in, if we do go with the van, it could come in a lot less.
Do you know how many miles on that 99?
117,000, give or take. Yeah, it's just, being that old, it's just reached the end of its life as a frontline ambulance.
Okay, and I did put a little bit extra in contractors